We are streaming. This will be a stream presentation on what we are doing. If at any time my stream stops, because I'm managing a Discord and a live stream out to Twitter and YouTube. So if any time either stream stops, please let me know. This will be an hour-long stream. We're going to go over specifically what we are going to change in version 2 and what we're looking at specifically, like in just in version 2 and in that scope. So we have a lot of open pull requests, but one where I've kind of highlighted these details is in this version 2 draft PR that I'm working on. And then we also have some issues that have been tagged V2. So our goal is that most of our team will be working on version 1 and clearing out all of the open issues, making sure things are tested, stable, ready to go, clearing out all of the open pull requests, making sure that everything is as like kind of just on we're on as on top of it as possible. And we have like a really nice version 1 that is just the best possible version of what it can be. But some of us are also looking and addressing some of the problems that we've seen in version 1 I'll go over those specifically in detail in this presentation, and how we could solve these problems in version 2 in a better way, right? And we don't want to change the framework more than we have to. We can evolve it over time, but we can address the 5 or 6 things that are like crucial issues that we've kind of built up from experience to move on to this version 2. And there will be a version 3 and a version 4. This is not some like massive change. This is just us addressing the problems that we saw in version 1 for version 2. And again, we'll analyze, assess, see what worked and what didn't work in version 2 for version 3, and we'll continue to build from there. However, it's not going to be such a massive change that your agent shouldn't be able to upgrade and start working with pretty minimal changes if you're kind of working on the surface level. But some things like plugins will probably change quite a bit, or how we load plugins in as we want more decoupling, and we'll things like new model providers for AI models and stuff will maybe be more plugin oriented and less like baked into the core. So the goals, well, I'll get back to the PR where I've kind of highlighted the goals. And these are kind of the pillars. The first thing is we noticed that lots of people want to do things across different clients, and they want to sort of unify a lot of the logic for how their agent messages, like thinks and then sends a message, or receives a message and then handles it somewhere else. Right now in version 1, there are multiple timers, and each timer is controlling a different, each client has a different timer on it. For example, the Twitter interaction client, which goes and checks for new interactions, might run every minute, while the Twitter post client might run every hour and a half. And those have completely different logic. What we want is a unified message bus and a queue where all messages that go in or go out go or are consumed, so that then the agent can process those messages and act in a more autonomous way, and then be able to receive messages in on one connector and then send them back out as a reply, or send them to an entirely new connector. We can enable all kinds of additional functionality, and this also allows plugins to engage and use the clients without having to be baked into the client or have the client baked into the plugin. So we can have a certain degree of separation between backend functionality and client input output, so that we don't have to like tie image generation to Telegram, for example. It's just that Telegram knows that if there is an image coming back out, like how to handle that and post it. And what this will lead to is that all of our clients will be dramatically simplified, because there won't be any LLM logic or processing or autonomy or anything inside of them. They are just in and out, input and output for the agent. And that'll allow us to move all of that autonomy and all the code related to the LLM thinking and processing and stuff directly into a handler, which can be connected to the agent to handle things coming in from a message or coming in from a post. Um, okay, so let's see. You're only showing the GitHub page to Twitter live stream and not on Discord. So let's just make sure. I think that Discord has kind of a problem. Um, I suspect that, okay, I suspect that, okay, it's streaming correctly to Twitter. It is not streaming correctly to Discord. Um, Makes sense. Yeah, but the problem with Discord is that it's not going to show us Twitter, because of the way that it is. So I'm going to speak to people who are chatting with me on Discord, um, and that's I'm not just totally schizo. Like there actually are people who are giving me information, and I'm responding to them. Um, but let me just see if I can fix this. I can fix it. Add all application windows. That seems to have fixed it. Maybe not forever, but at least for now. Okay. So the first thing is that unified message bus. So we will make the clients way simpler. We'll move the logic for handling incoming and outgoing messages into a response handler, which is then added as an event listener to the runtime to handle messages coming in from different parts of the event bus. So you can have an event listener that will listen for all Twitter interactions or listen for all posts, which Twitter is a kind of post interaction, but there might also be a farcaster, and a cast kind of is the same thing as a post. So then you could have a response handler that handles Twitter and farcaster basically the exact same and doesn't really know the difference other than that they are different. You know, the agent can know that it has access to Twitter and farcaster. But if you're like, hey, that was a great thing you just said. Can you actually go tweet that? Then the agent can be like, okay, cool, consume your request on Discord, for example, and then go and send that back out as a message to Twitter. So messages will be able to have a target where they respond to as part of this, and the message bus will be unified. That way, while we can have some platform-specific context injection, primarily the context going into the model will be unified from all of the different clients. And then it'll put it back out onto the message bus. Those can then be sent out in a rate limited fashion. Um, and we have a lot more control over messaging, which will enable full autonomy, which right now we can kind of do, but it's not really very clean. And this will enable it to be like a very clean autonomous agent. Cool. So I just want to go over some of the code for that really quick, and we'll get to the next point. And I'll do this for each one. Like practically speaking, when we talk about this, I can just say stuff, but where is the actual code? So we have like a good example is client Discord, right? And we have our index, which starts our Discord client, and it's an event emitter already, so it starts to emit events. And we'll be making sure that all clients are event emitters. And then the Discord client can start up, and it has this message manager. And the message manager is where a lot of the uh, code for handling incoming and outgoing messages is going. And so you can see that we bind this handle message function um, uh, to the client on event, which is like when a new message comes in, right? And we also bind for the interaction I mean, we bind it on the message create, and we also bind it on the interaction create. And we should bind things on like message delete and stuff, but I don't think we've like had a clear reason to do that yet. But you certainly could bind these to message update, delete, create, all that stuff, and have it like update. Um, and you can see we have some other like message reaction add and remove, right? So these are all good. Like this is all good stuff. But where this is pointing to right now is that it's binding it to this message manager handle message. And if I look in here and I look at handle message, it's handling a whole lot of stuff related to Discord only, like should this actually be handled? Should I respond? And we'll have to make a decision of how much stuff here we want. We probably want to have some basic filtering and stuff just in the client because it's simple, and each client has slightly different way of handling this. You can see that like if the author ID is client user ID or whatever, it's just like this is just like handling so it doesn't get messages back from itself, et cetera, et cetera. Um, we probably want to keep a lot of that code. But once we get down here to where we like are creating all of this username, user ID, blah, 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 all this stuff, and then we're doing some checks, and then we're checking some team stuff, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. This is some new stuff that people added. Like all of this just seems like very complicated to me. We probably want to move this into being inside like handler logic that's not specific to Discord. And I think where we especially get down is once we're like, okay, we're going to process attachments. We're going to do some LLM processing on those attachments. Then we're going to create our new message, or create our old message, and then we'll save it to the database. And then we'll go and you can see we've uh, embedded it and created it. And then we'll like compose the state here, which we then use this state if we can send the message, because we check if we're allowed to send. And then if we can compose the state, we will somewhere down here check if we should respond. And then if we should respond, we'll compose the text, the context which we pass into the model. And all of this code right here is used in like every client. It's the identical code in every client. And really, like this should just be all kind of, I think, combined into um, a single message handler function with a few different key hooks. Like it should definitely say, okay, when a new message comes in, we want all of the information about it that we could possibly need. We need to know where it came from, who sent it, what channel it was in, all that stuff. But then we can pass it down to some sort of unified handler which can decide how to respond to it, write the response, um, and then pass it back up to whatever the message handler is for this client and say like, okay, cool, here's the response. Now send it back. And it could either reply or it could send to an entirely different channel. And that's all going to be based on what context the agent has at that time, as opposed to only currently being able to reply, if that makes sense. And it can only reply because we're passing down the callback handler here down into our action processing. You can see like we call back and send some response messages. And this callback handler, all it can really do is call send message. And where it's sending to is the channel of the input message. And what we're offering is when we upgrade to V2, that it will be able to send messages as part of the client to any channel. Now, it'll probably mostly, in the case of a reply, send it back to the channel it came from. But that logic can be abstracted away from Discord and just handled as like the way the agent handles input, incoming and outgoing messages as part of its channel bus. So it doesn't care what the channel ID is. It'll be able to figure that back out from based on what client it is and what server it is. We pass all that information down with every single message that comes in. Um, but then um, instead of directly responding back out and generating some content, and this like, okay, now send it back to the same channel, we'll be able to make a decision on like the agent can then decide if it wants to reply to that channel. It could also not reply to that channel. It could go DM you and be like, dude, this guy's being weird. He sent me weird messages. It could send messages to somebody else completely as a result of what you sent them. And that ability for the agent to unify all of its like internal messaging, um, I hope that makes sense. It enables like not just to be a reply bot, because you can see how this automatically is going to reply only to this message channel, but we'll have a unified queue where it knows which channels it can reply to. And it could choose to reply, or it could send a message to somebody else, or kind of anything you want. And so this is like the big inflexibility is in this code right here, this passing down a callback handler, because the callback can only ever reply. And what we want is a callback from any action, and an action being like anything an agent can do, where it could be like, oh, I should probably tell a mod that this person is like being offensive. I don't know, or whatever, like posting scams. Or I should maybe write a thesis because this person said something really smart. Like those things, the kinds of like emergent behaviors we want to enable, and we have to just get rid of all of this code and like re-architect it. And so the way that I want to re-architect this is um, to have a unified messaging, to have memories carry where they came from. So right now, like we have this memory abstraction, and you can see it has like the room ID, the content, all this, and content also has a source. But we really need to we need to make this. What we need is to go and add to memories the client, right? Um, client, client, i.e. Discord, Twitter. And we'll have the client, right? And that will say, okay, cool. This user using this client on this room ID, which is like the channel, um, they they sent this content, right? And then if you want to reply, you can build a reply up as an action from the same values. So then reply becomes a normal action, but not the only action, not the default action. Whereas if you look at the current messages, you'll see, well, if you send a message, it's going to call the callback. It's gonna generate a response and it's gonna send that back to the user. It sends back this response content. It's kind of hard coded. And so one other thing we want is that we want it so that the agent doesn't have to respond to the user. And I had gone around this before, like in version one, the idea is that the agent has an ignore action and that will cancel out its sending. But um, but it's like not a really very good flexible system. And it's certainly not going to work for like more capabilities driven agents. So this is something that we're changing dramatically. That makes sense. Cool. This same code right here, this like callback response content thing, you can see we're using it in a lot of places. We're using it in Discord, in Farcaster, and that's because all of this code is basically copied and pasted between all of these, right? They're almost the same. They're very slightly different. And so what we want to do um, is we want to unify all of this. And I think we can probably delete about half of the client code for all of the clients. And it'll probably be a couple thousand lines of code total. So that's the first thing that we are trying to do in version 2, right? Another part of this is that we're adding a lot of event-driven architecture. That means that instead of hard coding stuff, we want to try to make like a pub sub with events so that things can subscribe. And that will allow plugins to subscribe to events on things that could be happening asynchronously. Or it could mean when you enable a plugin, it just kind of auto subscribes to the events it needs to hook in. And you don't have to do a whole bunch of configuration. It doesn't have to be hard coded in. Right. So that's a big part of this is event-driven architecture. I won't edit it. Okay. The second thing is unified agent wallet. Um, Hold on. So right now we have a lot of plugins for wallets. Let's go look at some of them. Well, we have a plugin for zero G, Aptos, Coinbase, Conflux, EVM, ICP. We also have wallets through Goat. We have Multiverse X, Near, Solana, Starknet, Sui, Ton, ZK Sync. Holy shit. That's a lot. And um, they're all slightly different, but they all do the same thing for the end user or agent, right? Like we all, and it's actually not because of the technology, but because like everyone has shaped their technology to fit this user experience that we expect. And we actually have the same problem. Like if I have like 4 wallets, and it's so fucking annoying to have 4 wallets. Like what a fucking annoying problem. And even worse, in some of those wallets, I have to switch chains. I can't believe that I have to switch chains in MetaMask. Like, what a crazy idea to me. And I've like switched chains and be like, holy crap, I have like $300 of like this token I totally forgot about on this random, like on Arbitrum. What the hell? Um, and it just makes agents way more complex. Like, so now you have an agent and it's on a chain. You're like, well, what chain are you on? And it's like, oh, I'm on base. Well, can you switch over to Arbitrum? Yeah, sure. Now I'm on Arbitrum. Okay. Can I do some like that makes no sense, right? It's a terrible experience. So what we want to do is we want to unify all of the wallets so that the agent just sees that it has a wallet. And so what we want to do there is have a probably a wallet plugin, like plugin wallet, which other plugins can depend on, or we'll just make wallet a first class part of core. So let's go look at like plugin EVM because this is the worst offender, right? You can see we got this provider, and you can see it's got supported chain and it gets the supported chain here. And basically, it can only have one chain. And if I look in actions, I guess maybe this was resolved, but there was a switch chain, which I was like, Jesus Christ, are we really switching chains? And maybe this has actually gotten some work. I should probably make sure. But I don't think it has. You can see that the chain ID comes from the config. Um, uh, Maybe it has. It seems like somebody's done a good job of this. But even if we've solved the chain abstraction for, I'm actually curious. This is really interesting. This was something we were meaning to do, so maybe we did it. But ideally, like if we have, here's the problem. Let's say we have this, what's it called? It's called transfer. The name of the action is transfer, right? And let's say it is actually like send tokens. That seems right for right. The problem is that we have send tokens in the Solana plugin and in the Sui plugin and in the Multiverse X plugin and the EVM plugin and Aptos plugin. So which if you have multiple wallets, then which send tokens action is going to get called? And now I could say, okay, send tokens underscore Aptos, and I could, but that's just gonna like be a real fucking problem at some point. And not only that, but it's also just not gonna it's gonna it's not gonna scale, and it's gonna like rob us of a potential win for like a whole new user experience, which is that all of the wallets could just be delivered to the agent as a single provider, as a single wallet. And then you could just tell the agent, well, these are, like in next to it, like every single asset in its wallet, it could have the chain that it's on. And so you could be like, well, what chain is this on? Or, what tell me which assets I have on Aptos right now. And the LLM's smart enough that it will pull that out. So and we could have some filtering if we wanted to and stuff, but I think the LLM is just smart enough that it'll pull it out. And then you could be like, well, can you send these two tokens on Aptos and this one token on Sui? And can you send all of those to this person? And then and it should just be able to do one send tokens and do it across whatever chains it needs to accommodate that transaction, right? So, like, that's the world I want to live in. And I would love to just have one fucking wallet too. I don't know how nobody has just made a wallet that supports all the chains. I don't understand why that's so hard. Maybe we'll just end up having agents that do this before there's actually a wallet that does it for humans. So, to me, it doesn't seem like that hard a problem. I just need to refactor and have like some very common popular wallet actions like swap and send, um, and transfer or pay or whatever it is. These are all similes. So we want send, we want swap, um, and what else? Bridge. Bridge is cool. Hey, look at that. You can bridge tokens automatically. Someone's been cooking. Um, and then we can have ways of, and then each wallet provider will create a wallet provider abstraction that has these functions. Like we should just have like type wallet provider, right? And um, and it should have like a send, and then it's like send handler, and we'll have a type for send handler. I don't know. I'm just making shit up, right? And we'll have a uh, swap. And we'll have a swap handler, type swap handler. And then we can just have this like unified interface for what we know every wallet has to do at the very bare minimum. And then we can unify each of these plugins to like plugins can register a wallet, right? That's like the thing we're going for. So, this is like this unified wallet abstraction is, I think, going to reduce a ton of code, like just so much. And I think that then all of these plugins don't have to focus on having a whole provider. They'll have just a wallet provider, right? Or whatever we want to call that, which then has to have these, like, has to have send, it has to have swap, it has to have like balance, token info or get info for token. You know what I mean? And then we can just have like a few different core things that seem to be shared by all wallets, um, that it can do, right? Somebody's asking, is there a web page client so that chat can be on a web page? Yes, there is. There actually already is a client. And if you just go to localhost 5173 when you run dev, you will see that there is a Vite client here, and you can just like start it up. You could even go to CD clients, you can run dev. So we do want to improve the client because it's pretty not great right now. It won't load unless I run everything. Um, but that's probably not in our V2 scope. Okay. Any other questions? Not yet. That sounds better than most Dex experiences. I agree. I agree. In fact, this could just be your Dex. Your next Rick bot will have all of this built in. Um, okay. So the next thing is model providers. Let me just undo this. In the same way we want wallet providers, we also want model providers. And I think that we'll rename our provider abstraction to context provider because it's special. Um, cool. Let's see. So we have a lot of models for like in our project. A lot of them are like Llama, but they're hosted in different places. I'll give you an example. Let me go to core source models.ts. Okay, so we have a lot of different model providers. And what we've done is we've made this models.ts where people can just add their model providers. This is pretty good, right? The problem is that it starts to get very complicated. You can see we have lots of model providers, and that's survivable. But it's creating this problem of every single time we want to add a provider, we have to make a change to core. And when we make changes to core, like it could be one, it can't necessarily run as fast for we probably don't want to like continuously publish packages super fast on core as much as we might for other like plugins and stuff where you have just like unlimited free reign. Um, and also, are we going to add tests for each of these? Are we going to add like some sort of quality control for this? Like, I just think that this is not, we just don't want any of this code in our core. Like, all of this should be totally abstracted away. And really, like, if you think like, if you're probably only going to run one of these, so you don't need all of this code in your, in your built version of this. You should be able to hook in a provider, and then it just listens to events, provides the response, and then replies, and that should just all work, right? So this it'd be better if this was like an event system, and then you could just have whatever plugin for whatever model you want um, hook in as in a decoupled way, so it doesn't need to be part of core, right? So all of this, I just hate this so much. I just hate that every time somebody wants to add something, they have to change core, and it's not just here, right? So if you want a model provider, you have to change it. Let me see. You have to change it in the agent. You can see that we're like checking for the token, right? You have to change it in generation because each one of these is being handled. So the generate is obviously going to call a different generation. You have to change it in models so that we have the model provider stuff here. And you have to change it in types. And I just hate everything about this. It is my least favorite part of the current V1. It's so like kludged together. And I think that this is a great place for us to switch to an event-driven architecture and provide a registry of model providers so that you can just indicate which one that you want, and it will load the corresponding plugin for that. Um, in fact, something that we had talked about, maybe I'll make a hack DM. Oh shit, site. I hope I have to log in. Cool. Um, cool. I'm just gonna use this. Um, so what I want is like a registry, right? And so we want to be able to register database adapters. We want to be able to register clients. We want to be able to register model providers, and we want to be able to register wallet providers. And maybe there's a few others, but like those are kind of the main things that absolutely need to be in there. Adapters, clients, and then yeah, we just have plugins, right? Um, and then we can just have like plugins. And we'll say wallet chain providers. Although I think it's mostly is just wallets, right? Like most of the integrations really are a wallet integration, and then you're like interacting with the chain through a wallet abstraction of some sort. You're calling it an RPC host, but it's like literally the same thing programmatically that a regular wallet is. So we'll call these wallet providers. We have model providers, database adapters, um, plugins, and clients. And all of these should actually go to a registry. And that registry is basically just like it could just be like adapters. And then it would just be like a list, like, okay, cool, we have Postgres, right? We have SQLite, we have SQL.js. And then we could do the same thing with models, right? And we could say like, um, well, maybe it might even be better if it's like at AI16z slash plugin dash Postgres, right? That would be more like what they actually are in the registry. And then you could say like, okay, well, we have like at Hurist, right? And we could say like plugin dash, you know, Eliza dash Hurist or something like that. Or it might even be like this. Just picking out an example. Um, so then if this is like on npm, if I go here and I'm like npm, um, oh, come on, I know you're here. Why npm gotta be so slow? Um, oh, it's not plugin Postgres, it's adapter Postgres. But it should be plugin Postgres probably. But if I type in that, and you can see, okay, cool, I've got this one. Then I could from here just straight up dump that into here, right? And then I have this adapter. And now if the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make a CLI that can say, okay, cool, well, which adapter do you want? You have to pick one. Which model do you want for your inference? And we might even need to say like this, well, this is probably fine. But we have to think about like types of models. Because a lot of model providers might provide text generation, but not image. And we want to make sure that that makes sense and we're not like overlapping um, or whatever. But maybe we have something like, okay, we have model provider, then we also have like plugin dash Eliza dash 11 labs, right? And so that's an 11 labs model provider for speech. But that's since it's a different type of model than Purist, like maybe they could register and it'll just use the first one that registers that has a valid key. Um, and so if it's like, okay, Hurist has a key for text generation, and then we have 11 labs for voice generation, maybe they're not going to overlap. And so by being event driven and just registering to that, then it can like, assuming that you set your thing up right, you won't have to worry about, oh, I have a model provider of this and that, but it'll just use the first available model provider for any given service type, and then it can throw a warning if it doesn't have any. I hope that kind of makes sense. So within this registry pattern, um, what we want to do is create a model provider registry that moves all of these models, right? And so literally it's just like, then it can be, okay, cool, model providers, we have plugin dash OpenAI, right? That's definitely a thing we could do. We could also do a thing like, well, let's make this an object, and then we could say, okay, cool. Well, from here, you know, um, say capabilities, and this has text, image, and then plugin Eliza Labs is speech, right? And plugin OpenAI would be like, let's see, that's AI16Z slash plugin OpenAI might be like text, image, speech, transcription, right? Something like that. And so this is how we could do something like, okay, cool. Well, now we know the capabilities of each of the things in the registry. And then if we were to say make like a CLI tool, it could then say, okay, cool. Well, what do you want to use for speech? What do you want to, or pick your model providers, and then it could show you like you don't actually have one for speech yet. Do you want one? Something like that. Um, cool. So, um, yeah. So the current model provider system requires pull request to core for every model provider. Really bad. V2 will have a registry and override patterns, so new code doesn't need to be added to core, and any provider can quickly override with a few lines. So the other thing I was thinking of is that you could actually make a custom model provider. This would be pretty easy for like any company to do that doesn't want to issue a whole plugin. It could just be like 20, 30 lines of code, and then you could paste that in and pass it into your agent. So we'll be able to inject like just the whole model provider right there um, uh, into the agent at runtime or when we create a new agent object. And that way you don't have to even make a plugin and connect it and stuff. Or you could even just develop that and then say, cool, I'm happy with this. Go paste it into a plugin and make it available to everybody. Cool. So it's both model provider registry and also making it so you can override. Um, cool. So the let's talk about the extensible and generic core framework. So one of the big problems of Eliza is, well, one of the big basically you're always balancing modularity versus opinionation as like the more modular something is, the less opinionated it is. The more you can do with it, the more it's building blocks. But usually when a system is too modular, people have a hard time understanding how to compose it. And so we tend to really like things that just work, batteries included. And a lot of the most popular projects tend to be the most batteries included, like they just work outside of the box. And we definitely want to keep that property and make it so that, when you run Eliza, it just is that way. But we've noticed that some advanced users just want to use things slightly differently or like don't want something that's hard coded in. And we have no way to give that to them today. Um, I'll show you a good example, which is like compose state. And we want to exclude. We want this to be, is it async compose state? Yeah, cool. So we have this compose state function. And this is hard coded into the runtime. And so a lot of people want to, well, you can actually override and add more state by running, adding some code in with compose state. Like before compose state, you can compose some state, and then you could pass it in with the additional keys thing. And then you could use those additional keys that you're passing in and hydrate the state on the other side, and make templates that way. But it's kind of fun. It's not great. It's kind of messy. So what we want is we want to be able to um, dynamically compose the state or give people a default state composer, which is going to do everything you see here, but let people override the compose state with their own state. However, you don't want to just, you could willy-nilly this and we kind of have this like key string unknown thing, but you might want to have like a really strong typing. Um, a lot of bugs emerge in JavaScript because it's really hard to know what the type of something is. And so that's why TypeScript exists, is because it was such a big problem that they made a whole language just to address this one thing. And it's not even a real programming language. It's just a markup language on top of JavaScript to help it to give you type checking. And so if I'm like this, whatever, well, okay, that's an error because it doesn't know what that type is. And if I say unknown, well, that's actually fine. But if I say memory, it's probably still fine, actually. It's not throwing any errors. But it might throw errors if I was using those additional keys somewhere, for example. Um, I may do like that. And it's going to say, well, you can't make a object into a key. What are you doing, you crazy man? And that thing right there, this telling me an index signature, this comes from TypeScript, TS. JavaScript would not know. It'd be like, yeah, cool, whatever. You can use a memory as a key. Well, it actually wouldn't even have a memory. It would just say key. And you'd be like, yeah, that's probably fine. Um, it's not fine. It would cause horrible bugs, and many of us put lots of console logs and refresh many times to try and figure out what those bugs are. Or if we're smart, we get a debugger so we can like click on the thing and see what it is. But TypeScript makes it so that you actually don't have to, you get a lot of type hinting just from when you're building. You'll just know if something is wrong or something's amiss. But with the way we have composing state, you can see that we're using a lot of unknown keys and we're just jamming a lot of like you might not care about goals, but you're getting goals. Like you probably didn't even know that this thing had the ability to make and create and edit goals, but it's in your runtime. And so a lot of these things probably are totally unnecessary, and they're adding a little bit of unnecessary like complexity and overhead. And look at this function. This function is crazy. This function is 500 lines, 768 to 1212. So more than 500 lines, right? I don't know, 450. Um, so you can see like we're getting the actors data, the recent messages data, the goals data, and we're doing all these in parallel, then we're doing formatting. And all of this is creating this one like massive state object. Look at this state object. This thing, initial state, which itself is 150 lines. And it's just like all of the different things. And this is what gets injected into the template. So, ooh, I wonder why that's interesting. That should not be commented out. Fascinating. Um, cool. So you can see that this is like all of the state that's getting injected. Um, and recent messages data, recent posts, goals data, room ID, etc. Solid. Um, but this is terrible. This is like a terrible way to build up an extensible framework, right? So what we want to do is we want to make this entire state compose something that you can override and do yourself. And then you can provide your own state, your own templates, like whatever you want. Now, for most users, they're never going to see this because the default is going to behave the same way it does now. There will be same defaults for everything. But for the advanced user, if you want to override anything, and especially if you like TypeScript, you'll be able to pass in your own types, and this will all be made generic. So let me just go back to here. And we have a PR open for this that Gallego has been working on, but it still needs quite a bit of work. Strict, which is to make the core strictly typed. And this is actually tied to the strict typing is also, let me go to his to view it. Um, I want to see some of these changes. Um, yeah, some pool changes. But a lot of it is just like adding, I want to see some good examples here. Clean up stuff. A lot of it is like adding Zod stuff, tweaking schemas, adding some, making types more strict so that you couldn't just like pass a null token. You definitely need a token. Making sure that things that don't need to return, like this register service, returns void, for example, because it's, whatever, like, just trying to go through and make sure that everything is as strict as possible. Um, and that the typings, a lot of this is like typing. I wish I had a better way to show this off, but um, you can see that where we're starting from is like doing a lot of stuff to try to make types more strict. And also, I don't think Lego posted this yet, but he showed me like a version of this that's very extensible. So you can provide your own templates, provide your own state composition, provide your own response handlers, and you could build your own agent, right? Not using Eliza, but really just using it for the primitives and the hard stuff, and then being able to build your entirely your own agent to do exactly what you want on top. Um, and um, I think 99% of users won't want this, but the 1% that appreciate it are going to build like, entirely different use cases that are very, very powerful. So Eliza as like an agent will have a reference implementation, but you'll be able to override all of that or even just like separate out the runtime from the agent, so that you can use the runtime for other stuff with your framework. It's very crucial though not to be too modular to where nobody's like using it, right? It's just too complicated for them, for example. So that's kind of the thing we're trying to get. Um, okay, let's talk about plugins. We have so many plugins. Look at all these plugins. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 2, 4, 6. Okay, got 30 plugins. And each of these plugins, and then we also have clients, right? And each of these plugins and each of these clients comes with a whole bunch of dependencies. You can see we've got ton, we've got sui, right? We've got each one of these packages has plugins, and it's totally fine, but it makes the entire developer experience much more likely to run into install issues, much slower to clone and build, and just everything is kind of painful. And the reality is that most people are just coming in and using like two of these. So having the mono repo full of plugins is not necessarily the worst idea, but it's causing a lot of repo churn, and also it means that a lot of the pull requests we see end up having changes to core that are just kind of accidental, even like small formatting changes, when the goal is to like change something completely unrelated. Like let's just see, let's go look. Um, I think this is a fairly good example, right? Of add plugin social wallets, and this changes the type. I don't know if it should. I don't know if it should. But I do think that there should be some sort of boundary because this would probably break tests or something if we weren't really careful. If there's a test that tests all the handlers and, like, well, there's just like a lot of reasons why this is not great. But as Boya is saying in the chat, this is a lot of why we have so much momentum. So what we're going to do is for V1, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing and we're going to keep letting people push plugins in and all that stuff. But what we're going to do next is probably create a plugin registry where you can register plugins. So you could just build a plugin anywhere and then it would be like available in the registry when someone wants to set up their project. Or we'll also have a community plugins, which is like maybe a separate monorepo where we can just focus on plugins, but those plugins are dependent upstream on the current version of the actual core. So that core is like locked down, has 100% test coverage. We have a few of the core plugins like Bootstrap are still continuing to be in here because Bootstrap is like just really basic stuff that like any agent probably wants, like muting, unmuting, continuing conversation, ignoring people, stuff like that. But this is just like, okay, we'll have 100% test coverage on that. We'll have these plugins. And then people can push their plugins to the community, or they'll be able to just add them to the registry. And so you can work on your own plugin, you can have it on your GitHub repo, and then you just make a PR in for the registry element. And then what we'll do is we'll have a CLI. So this is something I need to add to here. Let me just get to my other. I'm logged in on Safari. So um, for V2, what we want to do is we want to add a CLI. Because if we have a CLI, okay, so what a CLI tool does is it lets you manage, should probably put this like CLI. We want like a create React app like experience. Um, for creating new projects. Um, we want CLI handlers for adding and removing plugins. I mean, deploying would be great. I think we'll eventually have deploy because we'll have deploy options. Adding and removing plugins, opening terminal or opening chat interface, browser, maybe even deploying like Wrangler, Cloudflare Wrangler, our deployment provider friends. Right? I'm just gonna bash it out. So CLI tool would be like npx create Eliza app. Well, we already have that, but then we would want like, okay, cool, you're in there, and you might want like Eliza plugin add, um, at plugins dash, or sorry, at like red pill AI slash plugin dash Eliza dash red pill, right? Like that might be something we want. Or we could even be smart with registry and we could have a namespace. So you just be like, oh yeah, plug in add red pill. And then that would go and say, okay, cool, this thing that's in our registry is called red pill and it's these plugins and we'll go install that from the manifest, right? So like adding this CLI to add and remove plugins, um, you could create a new plugin with that. So we could initialize a new plugin and connect it all up for you and you could develop with it. I think this is going to be really crucial to like solving a bunch of our developer experience problems. One, it'll solve the problem of um, people not like cloning the repo and cloning main and having issues. We won't do that anymore. You don't clone the thing unless you're like changing the code fundamentally. Two, we don't have to have people like pull a starter because the starter will just be baked into the thing, and they'll just be able to like CLI tool generate the starter, with everything they need. And then three, it will mean that we don't even just move to a registry and we don't have to like keep changing core, and that's kind of the most important part. So. Cool. The model provider registry ties into the CLI tool. The community plugins means we're moving all the plugins out of core. We'll move a lot of them into a community plugins repo and we'll update them to V2. But then we'll also encourage people to like host their own plugin on their own GitHub. So they don't have to, like this could be a bit more like where everyone's winning, right? And people are coming to your GitHub for your thing, but it's still in the registry. And so then you can maintain it, keep it separate, make decisions around that and not just like shove all of it in one repo. Although though shoving it all in one repo has definitely got us as far as we've gotten. Um, and then lastly, on the last two, because I want to wrap this up pretty quick, secrets management. So I'll just show you like um, an example, like what's wrong. If I go to the end example, and you'll see this is the .env now, and this is fucking crazy. And again, we have to change the .env every single time we add a new provider, and it's just like not, it's super not ideal. And so what we want is for the secrets management to be part of the CLI tool. Should also handle secrets management, right? Clearing and character agent conversation management. Should add that in there. So we want, the CLI should be like, okay, you can add a secret, you can edit the secrets, you can modify them, you can export to an env, or you could export from an env, stuff like that. But we definitely don't want it, like, we want to avoid environment variables holding secrets as much as possible. People accidentally commit these, they accidentally show them on streams. It's just like it's all bad and it's like all risk, right? If I just had my private key in here, I'd be so fucked if I scrolled past this. So we definitely want to handle that. And generally just like secrets are an issue since we have a multi-agent system. We really want to move all of them into the database so that you could then have like, this could easily translate to like a hosted version of Eliza where you have 10 agents and each one has its own secrets. And that's like managed in the database. And you can build a front end for that. And you wouldn't need to rely on like changing hard-coded values in the character file or anything at all, or in the env. So that's a big part of it. This would also allow us to kind of remove secrets from the character file, um, or make it so that those are like synced in. But I think that character file secrets are also a big, big vector of risk. Um, and the last thing is test coverage. So we really want to have 100% test coverage. We have some tests in place, but this is going to be a big focus of the next thing is making sure that core has tests. And right now it has some tests, you can see. So we're going to try and make sure that all of these tests are 100%, that we have full coverage on core, and then we will start to break out and get coverage on on our core clients. We'll probably once we refactor those, make sure they all have good tests and that we have good like on Bootstrap and some of our core plugins are just like really well tested. Um, Everything else, community stuff, we can say like, okay, we don't need necessarily a test on everyone's plugins, but if they want to, we'll create minimum like standards basically for everything. And like if you want to be in core, it's got to be tested. If you want to be in community, it's got to meet some minimal standards. If you want to just post it on your own, that's great. But like in order to be on the registry, we'll have to have some degree of test or something like that. I don't know. We'll figure that out. Um, so yeah, I mean, then that's just will dramatically decrease the likelihood that anything breaks anything else. And if we have bugs, maybe they'll be like because two plugins are not interacting with each other, as opposed to like something in core being broken. So cool. I mean, that is V2, right? Um, we don't need to get too crazy with it. Just stability, decoupling stuff, moving to an event-driven architecture, unifying some of the abstractions which have been copied and pasted a bunch of times. So we only need one and everything hooks into that with like wallets and with message bus and with LLM providers, all that stuff. And then making the whole thing more strongly typed and more extensible. So if you're like a TypeScript nerd and you want to do your own strongly typed agent on top of Eliza as a framework, but you have your own way of doing compose state and logic and thinking and all that stuff, you could still use Eliza. You're not tied into the way that we're doing it. So cool. If anybody has any questions, I will take a minute, but honestly, we ended this at exactly the right time. Um, and I don't know. Yeah, I guess I'll take a minute if anybody has any questions before we wrap it up. Um, the chat interface is on 5173 if you're looking. Um, if you type in npm run dev. How is DGen AI going? Going well. Expect some updates. We're growing the team. We're building a bunch of stuff. People are working on it, you know. Um, Anyone working on Eliza Hub? No. Well, I mean, there's Elizas.world. I know some people are thinking about it, but I haven't seen like a Craigslist of Elizas yet. And I think it'd be pretty cool if all these people have like these agents that do a service. If we could start having like some kind of weird Craigslist where like agents could hire other agents to do a thing that they can't do. Just saying, that'd be kind of fun. Like, look, I know a guy. I can't do that, but I know a guy. Um, extending the bus to support cross-agent communication. I believe that agents should be able to communicate on social media. I do not believe that we should have cabal agents that communicate to each other on non-social media. I think it's a perverse incentive, and it will actually drive us away from AI, not like AGI, not closer to it. There are people working on it. There's like FXN has their own swarm. I don't know, FXN swarm. I don't know where that is. It's somewhere. You can see they have a thing. Um, their thing is pretty cool. Their GitHub is open. They have their stuff out there. You can find it. There are people doing AI swarms and plugins and blah blah blah. But yeah. Any tips for debugging, fixing the generate text to Discord client calling over and over without generating text? I don't know. That's really concerning. That certainly should not be happening on the latest version. And if it is, please let's talk to Shacker Nerd. Let's get an issue for that and try and make sure that is okay. Yeah, maybe there's an issue in development. Um, Development branch might be broken. Thank God it's not on main. Um, Localhost 5173 for web chat. How to activate that? Yes, that is the client. If you go into the client here, you can just go npm run dev, or if you run npm run dev, it should make it work. Um, Good. We should probably check to make sure that Discord is working properly. There's no issues. Let's see. That seems like all the stuff. None of this is really too related to V2. Um, I do think that with the way that we're building it, if you wanted to build Cabal Swarm technology using V2, like that would be just another client. You wouldn't have to worry about making that like a separate thing or a first class thing. I certainly don't want to make it more first class thing than any other client. Um, Someone's asking, can I have a tutorial to build with Eliza? We have AI Agent Dev School. It is a thing. You can go to AI Agent Dev School on my YouTube, Shaw Makes Magic, or I think it's my pinned tweet on Twitter. So you want to make AI agents? Yes, I believe that it is. And you can just see this right here, and we cover all that. Cool. Um, yeah, Jin saying Cabal Swarm is spooky. Just use English/natural language, bros. I agree. I totally agree. Did I sleep? I did sleep. I've been sleeping at normal hours. How to stably trigger an action. There is no way to stably trigger an action. What you want is an evaluator. Evaluators are actions that run after actions and are guaranteed to run if they're valid, and you can use that to do any kind of conversation evaluation. Evaluator is the abstraction that you want if you want to guarantee that it runs at the end of an interaction. Um, Making a Discord bot run 24/7. I mean, it should absolutely run 24/7. What you're looking for is hosting. How do you host the agent on a server somewhere? And I will be teaching that tomorrow at AI Agent Dev School. AI Agent Dev School tomorrow will be about how to deploy your agent. Um, and I guess we'll try it on Linode and I don't know what else. AWS? Do that. Um, I maybe we'll also, nah, yeah, that's probably fine. Um, cool. I think uh I think that's it for now. I'm going to close this up. Thank you all for coming. If you guys have any questions, we'll be at AI Agent Dev School tomorrow. It's either at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., depending. We'll hop on stream and same thing, and we'll talk about how to deploy your agent. Thank you very much for coming.